All right, today, well, this time around, the day is relative. We're looking at our vertebrate tour continues, right? We've introduced fish. Now we're going to look at the land transitional forms. So the forms of moving from water to land and some of the groups there. And I'm pretty sure most of y'all have heard of an amphibian and a reptile, I would hope. But if not, man, you're about to have a heck of a day. Like, oh boy. But let's get to it. So, first off, as we've done with some other groups so far, we're going to look at the influence amphibians and reptiles have had on us overall spectrum, right, of the world, right? We talk about these different groups. It's important to have a real world understanding and relevance for them. So, sometimes seeing their impact on popular culture is a big deal. We had video games starring lizards in tuxedos, which was like James Bond. Later on, doing Geico commercials. I enjoyed the film Rango for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I just find the chameleon character in that pretty entertaining. There's a pretty awful movie called Anaconda, made back in the late '90s, starring J Lo and Ice Cube. I never saw it, but I remember it being played at the drive-in when I'd go and see Batman and Robin. And then, of course, Jungle Book had a big old snake in it in modern form and the old animated form. Kermit the Frog is the source of tons of entertainment. Me personally, I love the memes of Kermit the Frog. There's always a new one popping up, and I'm just a huge, huge fan of that. When I was growing up, one in the area I lived had a minor league hockey team called the River Kings, and their mascot was a turtle. So that was a reptile influence. The lizard is a fantastic Spider-Man villain, and I love Mr. Spider-Man. So why not having a pretty awesome villain? I had an awesome action figure of the lizard when I was a kid. It was pretty sweet. Growing up, I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan. I had Ninja Turtles everything. Had all the toys. I had a video game for it on the Super Nintendo, the regular Nintendo. I had the action figures. I had like the bed sheets, man, everything. I went to a Ninja Turtles concert. I have no idea what happened in this. I was like 5. I don't remember anything, but I remember going and like it just being like, oh my god, this is insane. But I love me some Ninja Turtles. Still do like the Ninja Turtles. But it's a great thing. And so obviously turtles have always been a big influence on me. And then of course you have Godzilla, kind of a big deal. I love me some good Godzilla movies. And so that's a lizard, that's a reptile. In Kill Bill, all the assassins are named after snakes. So of course the main character, Beatrix Kiddo, just possibly spoiled her name. If you've never seen those movies before, but she was known as the Black Mamba. And so all the other ones around there, there's like the California King snake, Cottonmouth. So those other ones around. And then of course Pokemon, right? Tons of amphibians and reptiles represented in the Pokemon world. Some cooler than others. Charmander, right? One of the OG. Definitely one of the coolest ones out there. Bulbasaur, I guess, technically is as well. And Squirtle. Man, all three of the original starters fit this, weirdly enough. But yeah, so it's clear these animal groups are extremely popular, have affected us. And even at the very own school we attend, Florida Southern, has a mock, which I'll be honest, it took me a while to realize what that was. I wasn't entirely sure what a mock was. And I was like, oh, moccasins. That makes sense. I never heard of a moccasin abbreviated as a mock before. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that took me a couple months before I actually finally asked, like, hey, what is this? Because I was confused. But anyway, yeah, so it's awesome. So let's learn more about these groups, and more importantly, the transition to land, which in lab this week you should have done an activity on. We watched a video and actually answered several questions about this. So hopefully, this past week you've already had an introduction to this. So this is be a little more review. All right. This is some of the forms and lineages that have occurred. We're still discovering more fossils out there that show this transition from more of the lungfish ancestor leading on up to land-based vertebrates. So the amphibian side of things, there's a ton of transitional fossils that have been found, will still be found hopefully, and then a ton that will not be found. And then with these transitional forms, what you see is a mix of characteristics for a more land-based lifestyle and some more aquatic-based. And some of these went nowhere, just dead ends. Other ones had ancestors that would, give rise to the ones that are alive today. So it's interesting. And so you can actually see where the true amphibians come into play. And so there's some dead ones there, including Aethiostega. Then you have some other ones like Acanthostega, which is more of an intermediate. And then you have some that are just more like like lungfish and less like amphibians. So it's interesting to see this come along. And there's still, a ton of stuff going on here, a ton of research to figure out, exactly where things are happening, what transition, what adaptations were specific when they pop up, how important were they, that sort of thing. But there's some trends we can pick up on. Tiktaalik is one of the more important fossils, and it's found at this juncture, and so it's right there on the cusp of the amphibian lifestyle. So it was a huge fossil finding when that was discovered. But along the way, so all these transitional forms, the pattern that you see is these changes. So skull shape. If we think about it, being in the water, being on land, you need a different type of skull, different types of eye placement, so you can recognize and find prey and navigate in your environment depending on what you were doing. And so instead, you were going from these tall and narrow skulls to more forward-facing eyes and flat skulls with eyes on top, because you're trying to look up and find food at this point. Meanwhile, if you're underwater, just swimming around, eyes on either side, just looking for some food to eat. But now we're hanging out more in the water, because those transitional forms are usually more shallow water, not quite on land yet, but could support themselves with their weight, with their limbs a little bit in the water, the shallow water area. And so they would need to be able to look up and capture food out of the water, which is what they would do. So having that change in the skull was something that was definitely picked up on and seen. And so eye movement, head shape, those are big characteristics, and you can see that in these transitional forms going forward. And then you also needed more neck movement to be able to look up and down as opposed to just left and right. So again, you're getting closer to land type environments, so you need more neck movement to capture prey. And, raise your head up, snatch a massive flying insect overhead, something along those lines can do so. And so that leads to changes in the vertebrae, because you have vertebrae that allow for up and down movements and then left and right movements. So they needed those to come along and be modified for that along the way. And then also you're dealing with more gravity because you're living in shallow water or sometimes even getting on land for a short period of time. And so you need stronger bone support movement. And so when you're in the water, it's floating, right? You don't have to actually lift yourself up off the ground. But in these organisms, they did. They needed to have adaptations to support their weight. And then also ribs are important for maintaining a cavity for breathing. And so that was a big feature because, you kind of have to breathe a little bit. And so instead of just having, you got about that way to change the lung space, right? So ribs provide this nice open cavity when you eventually have a diaphragm that allows you to change the volume of that space to drive air in or out. Then also wrist, really enough important to help support the weight and, bend your wrist as you walk along for a little more comfort. So a variety of adaptations that occurred. Right, and then Tiktaalik is one of the big discoveries that came along. It's one of the big transitional forms, and so you can see in some of these pictures how kind of the body of it looked, and then it was kind of definitely hanging out in a shallow type of water. We have bone recoveries of this to see the limb arrangement and the bones of those. How you have like a limb present, you got a little bit of a fin type thing present, and so the fin with the wrist type thing that the Tiktaalik has. And then can kind of lift itself up and do some slight push-ups, out of the water. But you can also sit the flat head with the eyes on top, everything. And so what we're seeing here is a change in body plans from living in the water to now trying to live on land. And so it's a very strong shift in a body plan. So it is not, it was difficult to pull off, that's for sure. And so it's just kind of fun to see. And so and a lot of the various other adaptations thing about living with land is like limbs, from moving around, and front limbs and everything. That was all popped up once transitional forms were still in the water, in shallow water, and so it wasn't like a land thing first. It seems like they had limbs in the water, then they kind of expanded upon the land that way. So yeah, and so Tiktaalik was founded in 2004. So I was in high school during this time. I remember when this happened. I mean, we talked about it in my biology class. It was pretty cool. It just made living history in that way. So it lived almost 400 million years ago, very early tetrapod fossil. One of the things that was unique about it as a transitional form was that it had a mix of characteristics from the fish and tetrapod lines. And so looking at bones, it had some of the more classic tetrapod-like bones of, an ulna, radius, forelimbs, ribs, all those characteristics. The Tiktaalik is technically a fish, but it's been nicknamed a fishapod. But it's because it's such a huge transition between tetrapod and fish lifestyles. But it's technically a fish. At least it's what it's classified right now. Because it also had a mobile neck and lungs, but I mean it also had gills and scales and fins of a fish, and had basic wrist bones. It was still definitely more, fish-like, but it was a transition, absolutely. And it still lived and moved in water. So yeah. And so maybe you can go digging around and find some characteristics, or find a new transitional form with some unique characteristics like these to shed more light on this process. But here's it's a nice summary between the fish and tetrapod characteristics of Tiktaalik. All right, how about the dead things? A little more of the dead things. You can kind of get a timeline on when some of these popped up. So you can see the Devonian period, when the amphibians first arose, and then really kind of took off after that. Yeah, near the end of the Devonian, amphibians first popped up, and then amniotes too. Ooh, amniotes. What's an amniote? We'll talk about that. Another one that's kind of neat I like is Acanthostega. It was one of the first ones to have recognizable limbs like it does. It looks kind of cute. It had tons of digits. So one thing we saw that popped up on the trends of evolution is things starting off with many digits, and then they shrunk down to a smaller number as it went on. So having more digits like this is more of an ancestral condition. And it was not able to support its own weight from that they've been able to discover from the bones. And the ribs were not enough to support a chest cavity outside the water to actually breathe, so that wouldn't work either. But it was likely around some like shallow, swampy areas. So it is kind of neat. All right, so one of the things that pops up and is important in living is circulation, right? You gotta get blood throughout the body. Fish, we've already discussed their circulatory system sitting on the left, right? Basic one atria, one ventricle, pumps blood to the gills, then through the body. As we move into the amphibians, we're seeing a difference. We see 3 chambers, where you have 2 atria and 1 ventricle, but then we also see an introduction of another circuit. So now you have the heart pumping to the lungs and the skin, because our breathing happens through for amphibians through the skin as well, and so it's very important. It's not just the lungs for them; it's also the skin. But they pump blood to those areas, and then that blood will go back to the heart and then get pumped out to the body. All right, this is a huge difference, because what this means is it allows you to separate out a low pressure circuit to the lungs and the skin from a high pressure circuit that will go throughout the rest of the body. And so that's interesting. Yeah. But one of the things, though, is with the amphibian, and this is ideally with these 2 circuits, that's what you would get, is a more higher pressure, lower pressure thing. But since there's only 1 ventricle and they're not separated out, it's still overall low pressure, because that 1 ventricle has to pump to the lungs and to the gills while also sending blood through the body. It goes in different paths. So overall, we're not seeing a huge jump in the separation of pressures just yet, but it's coming, right? It's coming at us soon. One of the reptile groups will talk about it and has this. But this is kind of, building up into transition, if you will. And so it looks like there's a lot of blood mixing, and there is some that exist for sure, because the ventricle is not separated out. So there's blood mixing to some degree in this group. So when it comes to amphibians, juvenile circulation, if they have a tadpole stage, is more like a fish, because they have that 2-chambered setup and the aquatic area around it, single loop type of system. And the adults, they lose their gills, they have a lung, and they breathe through their skin as well. So you have a 3-chambered heart, 1 ventricle as the pump, 2 atria to receive. Got the double circuit, because you have the heart pumping to the lungs and the skin, then back to the heart, and then the heart pumping to the body. So that's the 2 circuits. And so blood will get pumped twice, and so that can help it travel throughout the body faster. And so that's nice. And some blood mixing will occur in the ventricle, so there can be some of that. However, it has some adaptations to try and prevent this mixing of it. So it tries to prevent that from happening. And so what happens is, when it comes to that pumping twice thing, you have the ventricles will squeeze once to send blood to the rest of our organs, and then it'll squeeze again to send blood to the body. So that's what the 2 pumps refers to as. All right. So amphibians. Well, the first tetrapods, amphibians. I've always liked the word amphibian. That's an awesome word, amphibian. It's like, ooh, okay. Now we got something cooking here, an amphibian. Um, but they were the first tetrapods. They had 4 limbs, hence tetra, pod, limb, right? And they're on land, so they're terrestrial. It includes more than just frogs, but also salamanders and these things called caecilians, which are pretty amazing. I like that way that word looks. That gives me like a cool color of blue, like cerulean blue. I don't know, that doesn't look that way at all, but in my head, I always associate them with each other. In terms of species, frogs and toads have the most species in the amphibians, followed by salamanders and then the caecilians. And the picture in the bottom middle, you see that blue thing? That's a caecilian. It looks like a snake or a worm, but it's not. And the bottom left is, of course, a salamander. If you want to study amphibians only, it's called batrology. Batrology? Batrachology. That's it. Sorry. Batrachology. There we go. Man, that's sad. Uh, Batrology. So it's like batrachology. Something like that. Batrology. Batrachology. Whatever. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, and so they can move on land. But still, water is important for them. So they have to have moist skin to breathe, and usually there's still a reliance on water for reproductive purposes, so for laying eggs. And then many of them will have like a tadpole type larval stages to relies on water. So there's still at least some semblance of water. So while they're still on land, they're not fully separated from land. They still need, most of them still need water in some capacity. They also have massive genomes, kind of fun enough, which is kind of weird. But yeah, they have tons of DNA working around in there. Anyway, and so looking ahead, so one of the common things to think about with amphibians is, of course, the tadpole frog thing, right? And so the larval adult stages separated out, different environmental niches, lifestyles, whatever. That's not the case in every single one of them. There are some that are born and look just like adults when they're young. It just depends. Some of every species has that. Salamanders, for example, some of them, salamanders and others look like they're adults when they're young. It just, again, it just depends. One of the main characteristics of amphibians are their moist skin. And so they create this like mucus covering for their skin to help them breathe, right? And so they have to have that. And then sometimes that mucus can be toxic. It can be something they either make or from their environment that they eat. And then they also have external fertilization where they lay eggs in the water. And so if you have fertilization with eggs, it's called oviparity. Oviparity. Oh, whatever. I can't say anything today. That thing. Oviparous is another way to say it. So that's what they have. They lay eggs. Vivipary. Why can't I speak? That thing, the V one, also exists too, and that's how they give birth to live young. And so they also have a 3-chamber type, which we've already discussed. They're ectotherms. So ectotherms mean they're reliant on their environment to help, use them for the temperature. So to help regulate the body temperature, they need external sources, right? We're not. We're endothermic. They're ectothermic. And so it's important to understand what ectothermic and endothermy is. So a lot of people use cold-blooded. That's not really, people don't really like to use that term. All right, so because it's disingenuous, because they can have warm blood. It just depends on their environment. So if it's cooler out, they're less active. If it's warmer, they're more active. It just depends. If they want to cool off, go to a shaded spot. Yeah. And of course, one of the big characteristics is the importance of skin and gas exchange. This is not the case for reptiles, birds, or us. This is for them. So they help breathe through their skin, right? So having that moist skin is super important for them. It's one of the reasons why they breathe. If you look at their respiratory system, so in their actual respiratory structures of the body, the anatomy reflects this. It's like it's weaker than the other groups because they have the lungs they rely on as well. And so the lungs are just flat out not as good at gas exchange because they don't need to be. They have their skin as well. Our lungs are better because they have to be because they can't breathe through our skin that way. You can give off waste products and everything, but you're not going to take in oxygen through your skin and have that go to your blood. That's insane. But yeah. So when it comes to amphibians, you can see some parental care. And so this is a trend we're going to see popping up. Fish, not as much, right? But amphibians sometimes, reptiles, kind of, not really. Crocodiles, more than most for sure. And then birds and mammals is where you see that huge increase in parental care of some kind. And so we're going to look at a couple different examples, some pretty crazy examples of parental care in frogs. But some can get their nutrition from their mother in some way. They are mostly predators. And so some of them, man, can be quite voracious predators. In the picture, you can see the one trying to eat the fish. There's some pictures and videos of some dominant frogs going to town. There's some massive frogs. I think it's like South America. They can just feed on mammals, which is pretty insane. Like a big rat going by, just a frog eats it. Like birds too. It's messed up. It's kind of disturbing. But yeah, and so there's also some. They mostly eat insects, but I mean they can eat other stuff too. So I mean, some of them are just beast, and they can be. I mean, if they're invasive, they can be kind of rough. But they do have dry skin. They're gonna not be able to breathe through their skin, and they will die. And so they're at great risk of climate change. So the warming overall of the planet is a huge threat to them. We've already lost a lot of species and population sizes to this. Habitat destruction is a huge threat for them. Pollution, again, breathing through the skin, aquatic, very susceptible to aquatic pollution. So it can be bad things for them. We've seen those effects. We've seen changes in populations and species diversity in communities change as a result of pollution. And they're because of that reason, we use as bioindicators. So you can actually go through and look at amphibian populations and see how they're doing and what type of species you have present to let you know what kind of pollution is present in the ecosystem. And then they've been, food harvest for food and pet trade, and so they've been exploited in those ways, and that's let hard through populations in ways. So, and then we've added in invasive predators that we brought along, and including the chytrid fungus, which we mentioned was a hazard for them. So yeah, the amphibians are taking on the chin right now. So I'm about a third of all amphibians are threatened with extinction right now because of the problems they're facing, and it's not really getting better. So amphibians are just, man, they're having a bad day, and it's not going to get any better probably anytime soon. So yeah, I would say kiss an amphibian, but that's kind of gross. They could have dangerous mucus toxins on them. So instead, look at one, give it a high five. Like, hey, buddy, good luck, because you're going to need it. It's kind of dark. But yeah, I love amphibians, though. I've always loved frogs. And so it's really sad to see them. Hopefully they can recover and turn okay. Anyway, man, but 22 minutes already? Good God. Anyway, let's hit up some diversity. So there's 3 main orders of amphibians. This is going to be a long one, folks. A lot of stuff to cover. So we're going to break this one down a little bit. But yeah, so Caudata is the salamanders, newts, and sirens. So this is Caudata associated with tails usually. So boom, got that. And so they have external fertilization and some toxicity in their species. Salamanders. The Sicilians, apoda, means without legs. And so they are legless and they burrow. And they can have jaws and teeth and internal fertilization. So one thing you're going to notice is the fertilization types differ in the different groups. So it's kind of neat. Urodela is being thrown around as another name for Caudata, but there's some dispute over whether or not it's all members or just living members, so really who knows. Sicilians can mate for 2 to 3 hours, so the more you know. It's neat. And then Anura, frogs and toads. And so they have external fertilization, metamorphosis, super common, and then toxicity, can be common in that species as well. Anura means tailless ones. So these names kind of make sense what they're trying to show you here. Yeah, let's look at some of these things, see what they got. And so here's some of the salamanders and newts. They're pretty fun. Some have bad reps. They're like a lizard, but they're not. They're an amphibian, right? So there's a big difference there. Tetrodotoxin can be found here to try and avoid getting eaten. So again, colorful things, trying to avoid them. And so the largest living amphibian is in Caudata. It is the Chinese giant salamander. It can hit nearly 6 feet in length. That sucker is huge. And so there's also another big one in Alabama, the Alabama giant salamander, which I didn't know was a thing. I went to school in Alabama. I never saw it. I'm very disappointed. Oh well, again, amphibians like moist areas, so they need wet tropical regions for them. They look like a lizard, but they don't have scales, so you know it's not a lizard. And also, they're amphibians. So their skeletal structure will be different too. So they usually find them like some damp, cool places. So like underneath rocks or something, in the streams you'll find them. It's maybe hanging out with dirt or something. But overall, salamanders and Caudata are really great at regenerating limbs. And so obviously this is of interest to us. So trying to figure out how they do it, if we can do it, if we can try and co-opt that in some way. Ironically enough, I said the lizard was born, not by just studying salamanders. The villain, the lizard, he was trying to, the Dr. Kirk Connors, the doctor, was trying to regrow his lost arm, so he's taking some DNA from reptiles and amphibians apparently, and then injected it into himself, and then he regrew his arm, but also became a lizard person in the process, went crazy and tried to kill everybody. So, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess. Yeah, and they can't have detrotoxins, so yeah, the troto. So in Legends, poor salamanders have not had the best of time of it. I mean, you always hear about like the potions. Oh, sorry, like the Eye of Newt and all that kind of stuff. But they were thought to be unharmed by fire, so we just pick them up, like throw them in fire. I think they would live, and they wouldn't. They would die. But hey, whatever. Since when does reality dictate, fiction, or what stories are being told, or what's perpetuated in populations? So those poor salamanders just get lit on fire. But they can make noises like little barks or rattles. Some can squeak, so it's kind of entertaining. And there should be some good videos, so check those out in the companion video playlist. And they can also detect some vibrations on the ground, which amphibians can do as well. And so with Sicilians, they are aquatic and fossorial. Well, some are aquatic, which live in water. Some are fossorial, which live underground. Some are both. They can get by with it because living under the soil like they do can be moist, so they can survive fine. And so their eyes are reduced. It generally comes to the left side of what they have. And they can be covered over, so you really can't see anything. They have some embedded scales, which is unique amongst the amphibians, and they can have some poison glands. One of the lungs can be gone or reduced, and then they don't have limbs or supports for limbs when a living species. So that's a pretty obvious difference too. And there was actually one that was found in 2009 of this group that can survive with no nostrils, lungs, or legs. And there's only one other Sicilian species known to live without lungs. So depending on size, that can affect, and maybe they can get by with all the oxygen diffusion through their skin where they don't need lungs. So, and that's just kind of a cool thing. There's one in Florida. I think I got a picture of it somewhere. But yeah, static vibrations. But the early Sicilians still had limbs. So we can actually go back and look at fossils of these things. Like, hey, look, we know that thing. Oh, that could have limbs. They just lost them secondarily. Here's some more pictures of these jokers. They convert to tadpoles because, why not? Frogs and toads is where we're at. So, frogs versus toads, right? Let's settle the age-old debate. What's going on? Generally speaking, frogs are longer lived and more of a hopper type lifestyle, have smoother, moister skin to them, and then special pads on their toes to climb. Meanwhile, toads have shorter legs, drier skin, and have more of a wart bump thing going on them. In some ways, it's not. I mean, it's used as a term, but not necessarily mutually exclusive traits. And so frogs are more likely to live in water than toads are, but I mean, it goes both ways. So it's okay. It's whatever. Fine term, I suppose, but just lump them all together. Common neurons and call it a day, right? All right. So we look at their skulls. They have some bone fusion, and so we saw that in lab, hopefully, with the skeletons, with those pictures. And so they have fusions of bones. Others just flat out gone. They don't have teeth in the mandible, so just swallow food whole. No tail as the adult. They also don't really have a neck, so they really can't turn their head like we can. So that's an interesting difference in some groups. And so, yeah, they also have their tongue attached to the front of the mouth, and it flips forward to grab food and then yank that back inside the mouth to feed. They can't have that larval stage, or some can be just small. And so sometimes you just have like a little frog. That's it. So if you're super small, you may not have a tadpole stage. Most species don't really show parental care, but some do have some crazy parental care. And we'll look at some examples of that. I don't know why I keep yawning. Sorry. But there's also, so their main lifestyle is through jumping. So it's called a sartorial locomotion. And so they have to have adaptations to deal with this. So it can be tough, right, to jump around. You jump around all day and see how much that hurts you. So they have to have modifications to their bones to support this lifestyle, right? So fusing of the pelvic girdle, longer feet, longer little toes in their pads, like a land. And so this strong shock absorbing region. And ribs aren't really that present either. So here's some examples of a modern and early frog. We got the modern one on the left side. You can see all the different adaptations they've seen pop up. No neck, reduced to no ribs, long toes and limbs, and fused bones. Compare this to the ancestral frog, and that thing didn't really have many of those at all. So the vertebrae were not quite fused yet near the end, so the urostyle wasn't really there. Toes short, not that great for jumping. So it's a big difference between them. All right. So the smallest known vertebrate was found recently. This little thing here is super cute. So we have in Papua New Guinea about a decade ago. So far as I know, it's the smallest known vertebrate. It lives on land, lacks a tadpole stage, and if it's this small, doesn't have a lung. So it can just breathe through its skin, be fine. This is it on a dime. That's how small this joker is. Sometimes on campus, I'll walk around and I'll see itty bitty little frog. It's not quite this small, but they're pretty small. And so be on the lookout. Sometimes you'll see like a little thing jumping around. Don't squish it necessarily. Look at it first. It could just be an itty bitty little frog just doing its thing. Down low, frog frog. All right, speaking of jerks, cane toads. So not all frogs are cool. Cane toads are native to South America. Hopefully this GIF in the bottom right works because it shows you how these things have exploded in Australia. So these things are native to South America, but they were introduced to a few different spots to control pests. And so Australia is one of these. They brought it over in the 20s, I think it was, somewhere in the early 1900s. Maybe it was in the 40s. I don't know. They did some experiments. They did like a slow release experiments, like 20s, 30s, and then like, we'll roll with it and just see what happens. And they just went and did its thing. I'm pretty sure it was 20s and 30s. Something else was, if not them. But yeah, and so they're also introduced to Florida too. But luckily, well, they're still here, so that's not really a whole lot of luckily to it. And so they were introduced to other areas, like Puerto Rico, and they actually control beetles. So that was the idea. They would eat a sugar beetle, or beetles that are fed on sugar, and they would go after them and say, okay, well, all right, we'll bring this thing over these beetles, and it'll eat the beetles that destroy our crops. So hey, it'll be all good. And so that was kind of the idea. And so, but now though it's an invasive species and become a pest because it's actually spread in its own way for a variety of reasons. One, it's a voracious predator, eats a lot of things, and has a huge appetite. So it just feeds on a ton of objects because eating a lot of native species. They also have poison to them, and this poison is deadly for other organisms such as dogs. And so what they do is when they're getting attacked, they'll just stay there, get all puffed up because one of their predatory responses to being attacked upon is they'll get all puffy to increase their body size, make them harder to eat. And then they'll just stand still, wait for toxin to kill the attacker, and then that's it. And so it's kind of unusual. They can do that, and they can't puff up their body. Even though sometimes there's some ants that they're immune to their toxins, and they'll feed on a living frog because the frog won't move because it's not really used to. They eat rats in some areas, and actually introduced in Jamaica in the 40s to try and reduce the rat population, but that didn't. I don't know if that worked or not. Probably not. Most of these things really don't work out that way. And so I actually get to work with when I was an undergrad doing some research. They were doing analyzing chytrid fungus and effects, and it was a big, amphibian lab. And so we did a blood taking thing. So I actually got to take some blood or try to take blood from a cane toad, but you only get one good stab at them to get the blood out because if you miss, they puff up and you can't find that vessel anymore. So I think I stabbed that thing like 3 or 4 times with that needle trying to get some blood out of it. Nothing happened. So good thing I'm not a nurse, right? I just be poking people all day long. I was like, hey, I'll get some blood eventually. But yeah, anyway. Here's some cool frogs that are not jerks. Well, there's one that's kind of a jerk. It's called the Pac-Man frog. So it feeds on all kinds of stuff. Yeah, frogs can be pretty crazy. So when they can be like sit and wait ambush style predators. They're just gonna wait and if something they run across, they just go and just pop them and just eat them super quick. The cutest one here, I think, is the glass frog on the top row. And there's also a frog that was discovered, this one, that looks like Kermit the Frog. So it's nicknamed Kermit. It's found in Central and South America, and it has translucent skin on the underside, so you can actually see its organs when it's alive. How cool is that, right? That's awesome. That'd be super neat if we had that, because you just look at your organs, see if something's going wrong. It's like, oh, look, you have a tumor on. Let's take it out. But nope, we don't have that at all. Maybe that's for the best. That'd be kind of creepy. Imagine walking up to somebody and be like, ooh, I see your stomach. Like the actual stomach. Like, I don't know, like your liver or your heart beating or like food moving through your intestines as it undergoes peristalsis or your liver just being the liver. I don't know. It seems kind of weird. Cool and weird at the same time. That's science. Also, pretty cool flying frog in the bottom left. That's all Wallace. And then the bottom right, we have the water holding frog. They can catch prey underwater, and they burrow themselves underground in the dry seasons. And then some folks in Australia would dig them up and then squeeze the water out of them to drink, which I assume would kill the frog. So that's kind of sad. But the middle thing there, that ornate horned frog, I think it's a beast. It can eat birds, insects, mice, other frogs. It's found in South America too. That's what I was thinking about earlier. But it's also in the Pac-Man, because Pac-Man's video game character likes to eat. The top middle is the turtle frog. That cute little thing looks like a turtle without a shell, hence why it's called the turtle frog. It lives underground in burrows and eats termites. It's an ugly looking little thing, but it's so cute though. That should be a Pokemon. The Pinocchio nose frog was recently discovered in Indonesia, and then the hip pocket frog, it's also called the marsupial frog, because it carries young in its pouches on its hips where the tadpoles will develop. The male guards the eggs until the tadpole finishes and they hatch, and then they go into its pouches. And this is only in Australia. So how cool is that? Cute they little are. This is the Suriname toad. And so the Suriname toad is pretty famous. It's extremely flat, so it helps it hide. But all those little specks on its back are used where the female will lay the eggs, and the male attaches those eggs to the female's back, and they just kind of stick to her skin, and they grow, and it forms pockets. Or the skin grows over the eggs and forms pockets over them, and so she has this weird honeycomb appearance to it. And I'll be honest, it freaks me out to no end because I realized I have a fear of tiny little holes like this, and so I really don't like it. But they just emerge out of the back. There's a video in the playlist, so I highly recommend watching it. It's pretty awesome. And then on the right side is a gastric brooding frog. Unfortunately, this thing's probably extinct because the last one was seen was in the 80s. But the female would swallow the eggs, and then her digestion would slow down, and she would stop feeding, and the tadpole would open her stomach, and then it would just pop out. Babies would crawl out, and it's probably gone. There's another frog that can do something kind of similar, though. But this one's probably gone, extinct. This thing is awesome. So this is a hairy frog. And one of the characteristics with a hairy frog is it has hair on it. That's insane. Frogs don't have hair. It's not truly hair. It's a hair-like structure found on the body. Also, this thing has retractable claws made of bone. So it's not true claws, but it's kind of close enough. And it has bone claws, which reminds me of a certain character. Wolverine, I think it does. Wolverine's known for having, big, thick mutton chops and then claws coming off of him. So does this hairy frog. What? How crazy is this? You actually see the bones breaking as they would pop out of the skin, and you can see them. It is very much bones coming out. And so they break the bones of a toe. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, what is this used for? And so this could be a defensive behavior, and it could also be used to help them get a better grip in their habitat. So it may be kind of loose, and so having this helps them survive and navigate in their environment longer. It's found in Africa, which is kind of cool, and they can retract the claws, and then the damaged tissue regenerate. So it looks to be pretty unique, and the only species that does this animal kingdom. So there's a Wolverine frog. How freaking cool is that? To top that. And then with warding coloration, so a lot of frogs look pretty. Most of them are going to hurt you, so don't leave them alone. They're either carrying the toxins themselves or they're mimicking toxin, but oftentimes you really can't tell the difference unless you're trained in this, which I don't think any of us are. So leave them alone. So next time you see a pretty frog, don't be like, hey, look, little frog, I want to touch you. Just say, ooh, hey, look, pretty frog, I'm going to take a picture and leave you alone. Because you could be poisonous to me. And so with having these flashy colors, it helps advertise that, hey, listen to me, this is my color pattern, you know what this means. It means I got some toxins in me, now leave me alone. Otherwise, I'm going to mess you up. And so it works. But of course, there are mimics who mimic these colors, and you really can't tell the difference. It's pretty impressive. Most of them get their colors, they're poisoned from eating certain insects, so they just eat them and they just turn that into something. Some of them are more serious than others, but some can be super, super potent and deadly. The Panamanian golden frog is pretty unique. And so this is a frog that was actually in our tournament. I believe so. It's a cool little frog. It's probably extinct in the wild. It's only in certain streams in Panama. The females are larger than males and has many toxins in it, so it had some of its own golden nature to it, that very color is a warning coloration for it, and try to avoid predation that way. But unfortunately, it doesn't work against humans. So hey. It does affect nerve cells, though, which is pretty sweet. Um, cool. So August 14th is National Golden Frog Day in Panama, and so I guess we can recognize a probably a now extinct animal. Most of the habitat was lost to farms, agriculture, livestock ranges, industrial expansion, and real estate development. So, yeah, it has toxins to fight off prey items, or predators, but not humans. So, humans always win, I guess. Poor golden. Reason why you should care about frogs, begin that downer note, is frogs are more than just cute, cool stories. Oh man, did I mention frog and toad books? Oh my goodness. Okay, so real quick. So when I was growing up, I read a lot of these frog and toad books, and so I loved them a lot. They're really cool. One of my big influences on willpower now to this day came from reading a frog and toad book about them eating cookies. And so this big cookie jar and all these cookies in it, and they were trying to just wolfing down these cookies. Which the idea of a frog and toad eating a bunch of cookies is pretty hilarious. But they're going to town on it, and they realized like, well, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's have one cookie. Let's have no cookies right now and push it off down the line. That stuck with me, man, because I still keep up with that lesson. In those various moments when I'm chowing down on some cookies, I'll think back to the frog and toad, go, hey, you know what? Maybe that entire pack of Oreos, I shouldn't eat that right now. Just limit it, man. Just do 4, maybe 5, dip them in some milk, call it a day. So that stuck with me. And I remember, actually, too, I was like a 4th or 5th grade, I think it was. I don't remember. Years blend together. But I was looking for some books to read in the library, the school library, and I wasn't finding a whole lot in, I guess, my reading level. So I want to go read some Frog and Toad books. And I was like, hey, I want to relive a classic. And so I remember asking the librarian, I was like, hey, do you know where these are? And she gave me a condescending look and tone, like, oh, they're over there in like the 1st grade level. And I was like, excuse the hell out of me, ma'am. I just want to read a nice, happy story about frogs and toads riding bikes together, going on adventures, being best friends, wearing clothes and a hat. All right, that's what I want. And why are you going to judge me? Because I'm going to go over there and read some stupid book on the 4th and 5th grade level. Like with some stupid kid or something. I don't know. Like, I don't want to read that BS. I read what I want to read. So I remember just being judged in that moment for wanting to read a Frog and Toad book. I was like 8 years old. Like, come on. I guess I was 8. I actually don't know. How old are you when you're 4th and 5th grade? 10? Maybe that's realistic. 11, maybe? It was like 98. So yeah, I was about 10, 11 years old. So I guess that kind of makes sense. But still, though, like, Frog and Toad books are amazing. I would read a Frog and Toad book right now if I had one. First off, it's going to be short. You're going to blow through that sucker. But anyway. If I have a child, I'm going to see what I can do to get into the Frog and Toad catalog of books and just get them all. So here, read these, learn life lessons, be a better person or something. I don't know. I don't really know what you do with kids. But anyway, that's the big influence of Frogs and Toads in my life. But in addition to that, the other importance of the Frog and Toad books is frogs are being researched for new antibiotics, which, as we all know, antibiotic resistance is a huge problem in the world. We need more of them. Frogs, their skin that they make, their mucus secretions and all the stuff they do, all those toxins and all that stuff they go through, those are substances that we can actually study and get antibiotic properties from them. And there's just been one team from one research study done alone that had discovered over 100 potential antibiotic substances from different species. So it shows us a rich just well of resources, of raw materials ready to go for us to study and find ways to deal with antibiotic resistance going forward. We got to keep these jokers around. They're going to help us out and help us live longer. It's cool. And so, including drug-resistant things. So, resistance itself, the bacteria, these things can be used against it. They found one in California that's facing extinction. That thing can help us fight MRSA. What? MRSA is a big deal, man. This thing can blow it to pieces. Like, get the hell out of here, MRSA. I got your back. That's called the foothill yellow-legged frog. Save it if you can, folks. It was super common in California and Oregon. Now it's not. So who knows? After all those fires, it could be gone now. I have no idea. I don't know where its distribution is in those areas, but hopefully it's not. That'd be really depressing. But yeah, so frogs are super important for us, for all of us. Medical treatments, they make us happy. Inspire books, stories, children like myself. Who doesn't want to be a frogman? Of course, Mario in the video games had a cool frog suit for a while. I love the frog suit. Super cool. Buster Green, Kermit the Frog. We'll let Kermit down. Man, 44 minutes. We still got all reptiles to talk about. That's insane. I'm kind of thinking about just cutting this into 2 separate videos. Oh, so I might divide it up where the notes will be together, but I think I'm going to cut it to where this will be one video and the other one will be reptiles. Yeah, a little behind the scenes action at you. All right, that's it for this amphibians. Reptiles coming up soon.